Welcome to the Cables to Clouds podcast. Cloud adoption is on the rise, and many network infrastructure professionals are being asked to adopt a hybrid approach. As individuals who have already started this journey, we would like to empower those professionals with the tools and the knowledge to bridge the gap.
Hello, and welcome back to the Cables to Clouds podcast. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about cloud costs and values for leaders and decision makers. And we have a returning guest this time, Eyvonne Sharp. So before we dive into the episode, let's cover our bi-weekly news section. Chris, you want to go ahead and kick us off here?
Sure. This first up in the category of AI news, which is, we've said this is going to be a recurring thing because there's always something especially every day, let alone every 2 weeks. Quick one here. So there was an article from SCX Central that I thought was interesting, talking about how LLMs have this multilingual jailbreak problem. So basically, I guess it's a tongue twister. Basically, the summary of the article is that obviously all the safety that's built into these LLMs to make sure that people aren't doing, bad things with them essentially is all based on the English language. So it was very easy to kind of get around these things using non-English mechanisms, right? So some of the researchers, I guess, that were involved have kind of proposed this new framework, security framework to try to protect against these, nefarious things. There's potentially, we mentioned if they could use the AI itself to translate it and then build the security with the translation. But I'm sure, Tim, you might have some comments on that as you've seen how well these things do with translating, Japanese and things like that. And in the article, they specifically call out, these kind of Eastern languages, right? And Chinese and Mandarin and things like that.
I've been using it off and on as I've been studying Japanese. It will confidently tell you, of course, the absolute wrong thing. In fact, there's been many times when I'm like, are you sure? Because I'm like, I don't think it actually works that way. And oh yeah, you're absolutely right. So I can't wait until we can build our security frameworks using this this type of ability.
I don't know how much confidence I have in that, but it's pretty simple problem to solve, I think. Just do it in other languages, right? It's definitely doable. What's next up, Alex?
Yeah, so we got there were quite a few conferences this week. Of course, a lot of AI stuff, like Chris mentioned. So there was GitHub Universe 2023. The big takeaway from this is really that they had some tagline that was basically GitHub was originally founded on Git, and now it's being refounded on Copilot, which is kind of strange because, Copilot was basically built off of what people were putting into it. So it's I don't know. I see lots of memes and jokes about how you're paying for the privilege of reusing what you helped it build. So I thought it was kind of funny. Yeah. And then we had this was the big one. This was a lot of crazy announcements here. OpenAI had a dev day. Big thing that stuck out to me is they said they have 100 million weekly users. That number to me is just nuts. Crazy. That's so many people. It's just continues to blow up and get bigger and bigger. What do you guys think about that number?
I'd say I definitely expected it, to be honest. I mean, it's as much as we see it popping up in the news, that makes sense that it's permeating out to the non-tech verticals very quickly, right? Because that's what it's used for, right? We talked about this earlier. You have, your kids are using it for the schoolwork and things like that. So it's, I'm not too surprised.
No, I was going to say that's the same thing. Actually, 100 million actually is not that surprising. Weekly, of course, that's a weekly number, right, and that's where the iPop comes from, right? Is that? But yeah, it is very quickly. AI is becoming very quickly ubiquitous, almost, and of course, OpenAI, ChatGPT, kind of the first mover advantage there. So yeah, that doesn't surprise me, but it's a big number.
And then, so the other thing, this is what really blew my mind. I think I was telling you guys this earlier, but I've been kind of like, I've been paying attention to AI and it's kind of been in the background. I'm like, kind of like, is it really that big of a deal? But they announced custom GPTs, and just seeing the demo of this really blew my mind and made me think maybe there's a lot more going on to this than I thought there was. And essentially what these are, the demo that they did on stage was like Zapier, right? Which is like a home automation software. Companies or just people can build their own model that you can just like type into, and it will do everything for you on the back end. So like a simple example is, you have smart blinds, right? And you're like, hey, I want to set up an automation that every morning when I wake up, my blind's open for me. And you just type it into GPT and it will like, touch all your devices and like figure everything out for you. It's like turning GPT into like an AI assistant. But it's all, companies can build it out for you. And then you just interface directly like you would with ChatGPT. So I think the possibilities here are insane and endless.
It's like a front end, basically. That's what it is like a custom front end that anyone can kind of interact with. They don't need to know how the code works. You could like build whatever you want and just talk to the app. And, based on these GPT, I guess, personas or whatever, they can interact with the back end and actually do the coding essentially for you to make all that work. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, to me, this just seems like it's the next iteration of things actually being intent-based. I feel like we've been hearing this phrase intent-based for like years now. And like, name one product where you can literally just specify your intent in this space where it actually does what you want it to do. Like this is like that actually coming to fruition. So I think it's pretty cool.
As part of this demo, Sam Altman, who's the CEO, he built a custom GPT with his voice in like 5 minutes. So it's like, it's not even hard for these companies to build these things either. So I don't know, lots of cool stuff to watch out for. Tim, what do you got for us next?
So from our friend Duan Lightfoot over at AWS, actually, he put out a blog on the AWS community site about network engineers getting acquainted with generative AI. So this is topical. If you're a network engineer, if you're trying to think like, how the hell do I start getting involved with this? We've got the link, of course, in the news, in the show notes. So yeah, take a look at that article. He lays it out really well, and get yourself started. And let's see. And the next one's a big one, big one. So President Biden signed an executive order basically on how to get the government to start governing AI, I guess. There's a lot to unpack here. Like how big is the EO? It's like 20 something pages or something.
It's huge. Yeah, it's very long, in depth.
Yeah, and I'll ask you guys' opinion of it just in a second. But just some of the highlights. It's very, very high level because you can tell that the people writing it don't really know, like enough about the technology. So it's very wide, and that's actually one of the criticisms that's already started to come out about this order from the open source AI community. But yeah, it casts a really wide net. But it basically says, the government's role in this is to make sure that American privacy and security and safety and everything is thought of and enforced when these companies are going out there and building AI. So you guys have looked through it too. Alex, Chris, what do you guys think?
There's a lot here, and I have not read the whole thing, and I don't pretend to be an AI expert or legal expert or anything like that. But man, like obviously the government had to do something. So I think this is definitely a good start. But my concern is, like Tim said, who in the government actually like has the knowledge to be able to speak to these things and say what kind of guardrails should be in place, right? I've seen a bunch of stuff on Twitter. There was like some giant letter that was written out by a bunch of like the open source AI community, like you were talking about, Tim, and they're like opposing this. And I haven't read that either, so I don't want to, throw my thoughts out there about it. But I just know that this is an explosive thing that's out there right now, and I'm sure there's lots of sides and debates to this.
Yeah, there's plenty of pieces in here that are really good. You'll read it and be like, yeah, obviously it should behave that way. But like, I just do not know how you don't. How do you enforce half this stuff, right? Especially without the heavy hand being a government, right? I'm sure not only the open source people are probably feeling a little attacked. I'm sure people with the tinfoil hat people are also very upset by this. Like they don't want government, playing in this field at all. So it's, I just like I said, I agree with everything you guys said, but in addition to that, like, how the hell do they like enforce this on anyone without being like way more involved than they should be?
I'm suddenly actually seeing, now you mentioned the tinfoil hat people, Chris, I'm actually envisioning now the meme with the guy with the two buttons. And one button in this case would be like, Skynet's going to destroy us all. And the other one would be like, the government has to stop it. The government's taking my privacy away.
Yeah, lose. All right. And next up, we have a report from Gartner saying that cloud concentration has now made its way into a significant emerging risk for many organizations. So there's a list that they have in here of the significant risks, or the top 5 emerging. AI is up there, but now we've seen the cloud concentration piece come into this as well, and really just talking about it. To me, this it just sounds like vendor lock-in, but like at a cloud concentration perspective, right? Because you're ultimately, it's the same argument that you'd have, if you're all in on AWS and, there's points in here that you have such a high dependency on them, you're involved in their blast radius, right? Because you inherit that from them, right? And then, there's this other comment about the regulatory compliance issues per geographical area and things like that. So I don't know. This just sounds like vendor lock-in to me. And while I definitely agree with that, but I think vendor lock-in always comes with that the grain of salt, because it's the alternative to it is commonly not as any better than being locked in on one vendor. And plus these vendors in this scenario have gotten to the scale where they're providing redundancy and things like that at a level that no enterprise would ever do, right? So while yes, US East 1 going down still fucks a lot of shit up, but that I feel like
I was just thinking that.
Yeah, but at the same time, like, I don't know. I don't know exactly how I feel about it, but that's how it came across to me. I don't know about you guys.
Well, we talked all the way at the beginning. We talked about like some of the reasons to use the cloud, and multi-cloud DR was something we specifically said was not something that was on the list of reasons that you would do it, right? Like,
yeah, right.
The idea of doubling your infrastructure and trying to build everything in AWS, then figure out how to build the same thing in Azure and hope all the services match up and everything is ridiculous. So yeah, I totally agree that's anyway. What do you think, Alex?
Yeah, I agree with you guys, and I think it does say, I think there is a part in the article where it does say vendor lock-in, right? So I agree with you, Chris, that's exactly what this sounds like. And we did a whole episode, right, around the importance of multi-cloud. So I think we did talk about this quite a bit, and what ways around that. And like you said, it's so redundant. Like, you can just design around a lot of failures in the first place.
You'll pay
there's
for
some
it.
things you can't avoid.
You'll pay for it, but you can design.
You're going to pay for it though. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. All right. What do we have up next, Alex?
So this one's pretty cool for me. I love. I follow a lot of the stuff that Cilium has been doing. The parent company's Isovalent, right? So what stands out about this is so Cilium they're coming out with a new Cilium certified associate certification. The thing that stands out most to me about this, though, is that it's not from Isovalent. It's actually from the Linux Foundation, which is like very interesting. It even writes in the announcement article that they're not the ones that came up with the questions or the blueprint or anything. It's like a bunch of different vendors that use Cilium. And for anyone that doesn't know, Cilium is basically the de facto like CNI container networking interface. So it's the networking piece of Kubernetes. And it's been adopted by pretty much every major Kubernetes distro that there is, right? Like AWS, their Kubernetes service uses it, Azure, GCP, they all use it. So I just thought it was really cool that it's coming out in 2024. It's definitely something to look out for. And this article has links to Isovalent's like map with all their labs and everything that walks you through and teaches you all this stuff from the very basics. So maybe a new kind of CCNA for the future, I don't know what you guys think about it.
Maybe. I think the biggest benefit to the CCNA, at least obviously it's been around for, God, 30, 40 years at this point, it almost seems like. But, the CCNA at least has this fundamental piece that's built into it, like all the networking fundamentals that you can, like, even if you're not going to work on Cisco, there's still a great deal of, or at least there used to be, I haven't taken the recent CCNA, but there was at least a great deal of fundamentals that you get to learn from that, just on how, like, even how a computer works in some capacity from a networking perspective. This one, I think, has a lot of implied knowledge that you're supposed to walk in with, at least, like, be familiar with Kubernetes and have some hands-on experience with stuff like that.
Yeah, that's fair.
It's, but who knows? I mean, same conversation. People have been like, "Oh, so I get my CCNA or should I learn Python?" Kind of do both, right? Maybe we're at this point where it's like, do I get into cloud or do I learn Kubernetes? Like maybe it's both. So I don't know. You might be onto something.
I imagine it's pretty lightweight, honestly. I bet having said that, of course, I haven't taken it, but I would assume. It's just not that. I don't feel like it's not like the depth of a CCNA, for example, or something that's like really basic about just like, here's all of networking. It's going to be, here's how Cilium works,
Right.
Which is pretty small comparatively.
And just, I think it does say, prerequisite knowledge is like, I think it's the KCNA level, which is like it's
Kubernetes,
the very
right.
entry level
Yeah.
Kubernetes certification. So you're right, Chris. You do need to know a little bit. Yeah,
I'm going to check it out. It actually sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, you can sign up to get notified once it's actually available. I don't think it's not released yet. I think it's coming. I think in the next few months or something like
2024.
that. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But you can. There's still. I had a look at the curriculum. The curriculum looks good, at least for what's published so far. Pretty evenly distributed across all the networking and security kind of frameworks that they want to talk about. So yeah, I'm excited for it. I signed up to get notified. So we'll see.
Yeah, maybe we'll all take it and report back.
There you go.
Whoever gets the lowest score has to buy something for everyone else.
Oh God,
I'm not playing that game again.
don't let Tim. Yeah,
Yeah,
Never again.
ask-
I got tricked once. I'm not doing it again.
If you ever see Tim in person, ask him how high he scored on the CCNA collaboration because he did great.
Actually, it was the CCIE collaboration. The written.
It was the written.
That's what we all took.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
this kind of goes right into the next point, which was KubeCon. KubeCon NA was this last week as well. It's very quiet news cycle for this year from KubeCon, and I don't know if it's, I talked earlier. There was the two big like AI conferences. There was GitHub Universe, and there was the OpenAI Dev Day. So I don't know if it was just overshadowed, but I think a lot of this is that Kubernetes is becoming kind of just boring a little. Like it's still complicated to use and implement and work on. But I think that it's just become such a entrenched part of like cloud infrastructure. I think it's more about what people are building on top of it and not so much how to build it or use it anymore. What do you guys think?
Yeah, pretty much like you said. I think Kubernetes is getting to the point where it's almost what do you say, run rate at this point. It's like it's no longer the cool kid on the block. It's supposed to be. It's like it's at the point where you should have been doing it for quite a while now. Not to say that it's at that adoption rate, but yeah, I think it's just there's not a lot of coverage yet. I mean, I've seen some kind of news here and there, like what happened at KubeCon, but like I haven't seen any major announcements so far. I think that maybe just be a victim to the cool kid thing, but I'm sure there was some cool stuff. I don't know about what you saw, Tim.
No, I totally agree, and I think that Kubernetes is now like mature enough that you're not going to see huge, amazing, like earth-shattering innovations that need to come out of it anymore. It's performing its function pretty well, so that doesn't really surprise me. Although, I mean, we have KubeCon, so I mean, obviously, people aren't sitting around twiddling their thumbs while they're there, I assume. So obviously, there are talks and stuff, but I'm curious to see coming out of there, like if it's not about innovations and new features and all that, like what's new, what's interesting about Kubernetes moving forward.
All right. So Tim, what do we got left?
Oh yeah, of course. So let's see. We have the AWS Fault Injection Simulator is a offer by AWS. It's free and it's a very small article. There's actually very little to say about it, but if you can think of like Netflix's Chaos Monkey type of thing, it's a little bit like that, where you can kind of schedule this thing to come in and start breaking stuff, and essentially and see how your environment reacts. Obviously, you probably don't want to necessarily roll that straight to production, but it's probably really good for testing failover scenarios, testing fault scenarios, just in your lab. Spin up your lab that's just like production, run all your test simulations, write it down the results, and then make changes to your production, hopefully, based on what comes out of that.
Yeah, it's pretty, I mean, I'm just going to comment on this. It seems like AWS is releasing a lot of really short articles around this time. I don't know if it's just to like not put out things.
Saving it up for reinvent.
Maybe?
Teasers.
I think so. Yeah. So maybe this will lead into something bigger at reInvent. But I think that, it's kind of like the Chaos Monkey thing, but like, I don't know. Look, I will not complain. I will not admit to being a compute expert or anything like that. But one of the examples they give here in this kind of a fault injection simulator experiment thing is that you can, increase CPU on your instances up to, 90 to 100%. How are they getting access to that? I don't know how that works. Like, is that like concerning to people? Are they getting CPU level access on things that you're running
you signed
your
the
environments
EULA.
on?
Come on.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that's right. Maybe it's in there. But
there is a package that you can yourself install on your box to tax it. So I assume that's something like that, where on the back end they can like install the package and then start running it. But yeah.
So it probably requires an agent. Yeah. Okay, makes sense.
Oh, I'm sure it requires an agent. I'm sure. Yeah. That's
And
pretty cool, though.
And you'll sign your life away when you install the agent, I'm sure.
Oh, well, they're going to collect all the telemetry and then use that to improve products and services.
So they're building that model, baby.
All right, I got one more, and then we got a fun one after that, I believe. So Linkerd, the SUSE partner, is partnering, with SUSE on SUSE Linux. God, I'm got me doing it now. Before the show, Chris was like,
SUSE.
"How do you pronounce it? How do you pronounce it?" We were like, "It's SUSE." It's like I keep hearing people call it SUSE. He's got me doing it. Sorry, SUSE Linux is partnering with Linkerd to do edge computing, like Kubernetes on the edge. So SUSE has a lightweight Kubernetes a package called K3S, which is, again, very lightweight, meant to run on like OT networks. So the idea is that you can build like tiny little worker nodes, essentially cube type environment, and then have use this Linkerd service mesh to connect to a control node, elsewhere in the OT network that can do all the kind of orchestration and stuff. So this is kind of interesting. So we've got edge computing and Kubernetes and service mesh. And to me, it's all like, it makes sense, right? You look at an OT network and I'm like, oh yeah, that's like, that makes perfect sense. But I can't, I'm trying to think of like other situations where something like that might make sense. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of, use cases for this, like sensor, like think of like farming, right? Like you can have sensors, for your crops, right? You need a way to, put these, the thing is like both K3S, whatever you want to call it, and Linkerd are just super fast and lightweight. So they run on like ARM processors. So you can literally stand it up on like a Raspberry Pi.
Yeah.
And I think that's what the appeal is here, is that they're both super fast, super lightweight. And honestly, I'm kind of surprised it took this long for, edge stuff to start kicking off, but I think this is really going to drive some more innovation and competition in the edge space.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we remember the rumblings about IoT and everything just a few years back. So I'm with you, Alex. I'm surprised it took this long, but it just makes more sense that, the lightweight compute element that is now being used for modern applications is making its way to the edge. So yeah, nothing too surprising here. Nothing huge in this announcement, just that it's coming, I guess. We'll have to see what comes, but it should be pretty cool. Might be a game changer for that space.
Yep. And speaking of game changers, we're going to round out this week with an amazing announcement. Chris, go ahead and bring us home.
Yeah. So Alex, you sent this article to us, and I almost put it in a bucket that we called cringe news. Not that I don't know what to think about it yet. It's crazy. So there's this company called Humane that has basically developed this wearable technology called an AI pin. It's like a little thing that you clip on your lapel, has a built-in camera, AI processing chip, and it's backed by this whole cell network that is built to build all this AI stuff for you. It's just it's really strange. It's it projects these the display on your hand so you can see the
laser ink.
the weather thing, and I will say it's kind of cringe. You can watch this the introduction video that they have on their website. You can tell that it's a married couple. They're ex-Apple, and apparently they worked potentially with Johnny Ive, and there's no surprise to that whatsoever. It looks like an Apple promo through and through, and oh my gosh. And then Alex, also you found that New York Times article where they're talking about some Buddhist monk was basically telling them that the company was going to be
Brother Spirit.
Amazing. Yeah.
That was his name.
I don't know if it's a bit. I genuinely don't know. Maybe they have gotten me, and I'm just it's crazy, dude. It's the Silicon Valley bit. If you've ever watched Silicon Valley, the Huli thing, it's exactly that. It's crazy, dude. I don't know. How do you guys feel about it?
I
speechless.
I can't even. I don't.
It's what's that? I think it was the movie Grandma's Boy. Have you guys seen that?
Oh, I love that movie so much, dude.
Isn't it when Steve Martin is the dude with long hair and he's sitting cross-legged on the table and just lighting up incense and stuff, and he's I was swimming this morning with the dolphins. And
that was Kevin Nealon. That was Kevin Nealon.
It was Kevin Nealon.
Oh, okay.
It was Kevin Nealon. But yeah. He's the head of the software company or whatever, right? And he's super hippie. Yeah,
that's exactly what this New York Times article that Chris is talking about reminded me of. It's they found a Buddhist monk named Brother Spirit through their acupuncturist who introduced them to Mark Benioff, and it's they were at his house and they were here's two products. This is the one. That's going to be the big one. It's the craziest story ever, dude.
Right.
Well, I'm amazed wearables are coming back, man.
You know what? With AI, they're going to want to put AI assistants. Think about it. Think about the progression there, right? It's all cyclical. It's okay, now we got AI. AI can be an AI assistant. What's a better assistant than a wearable?
Right.
That's what they're.
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously there's two ways this can go. It's almost funny and cringe, but at the same time, it's totally a Black Mirror moment to me. It's what bad could come from this? I think could be far worse, but I don't know. We'll see what happens.
I saw one of the best comments or arguments I saw for this though, which was surprising, is so it costs $700, but then it's also I think it's $24 a month subscription. Which is that sucks. It's a subscription model, but I saw a point that was really good that it's got its own number. It's cheaper than paying for a cell phone, but it gives you the cell phone number. So I don't know. That was a cool, if you're going to do it anyway, that was the argument, is that you're going to pay for a phone. Why not just pay for this and you get all the extra features? So that should wrap up all the news. I know we went a little long. So we're going to go ahead and get into the episode. Again, we had a guest on, Eyvonne Sharp, returning guest. And this time we talked about cloud cost and values for leaders and decision makers. You guys have anything to say about this episode? I thought it was really good. Eyvonne is always, a joy to talk to. She's got lots of insight. She is constantly in the room with the people that make these decisions. So she had a lot to say. Tim, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't say it better, right? It's always a delight having Eyvonne on to talk with us. You could just she could just talk about anything. She could open the phone book and start talking, and probably be just as excited.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, it's always good to hear her insights, and this is a great episode. This was good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a plug, timing, oddly enough, I think just put out a blog on the Packet Pushers network about what business outcomes mean to IT, and there's a lot of overlap with that. So I feel like listen to this episode, hear what she has to say, and also read that article. It's really good. But yeah, it was a great conversation as always with Eyvonne.
Awesome. All right, well, let's get to the episode.
Hello and welcome back to the Cables to Clouds podcast. I'm your host this week, Tim, and we have a very special guest with us this week, a returning guest, Eyvonne. Go ahead and reintroduce yourself, please.
Yeah, sure. I'm Eyvonne Sharp. I am a technical lead and customer engineer with Google Cloud, and you may know me on Twitter, or the platform formerly known as Twitter, as Sharp Network.
It will always be Twitter. I don't care how many times he renames it.
Yeah, we're not saying the other name.
Yeah, that's yeah.
Okay, so this is cool because we released an episode of, I guess it would have been a couple months ago now, episode 12, which is Where Are the Cost Savings, where we were talking about things basically. We tackled things like where's all the savings from the economy of scale. And Eyvonne listened to that episode, and she had some points that she wanted to make, and we really like having Eyvonne on the show. So this was not a hard sell. So we would love to talk about this with Eyvonne. She brought some great points, and I'll actually let her start making them.
Sure. Yeah, I was listening to that episode, and I think one of the things that's helpful as as infrastructure folks who are working in the network day to day, we always think through the lens of technology. And in the last few years, I've had the opportunity to be in the room where decisions about cloud are being made. Are we going to go to cloud? What workloads move to cloud? And how do we think about what cloud does for us and whether or not to make that decision? And I think it's important that when customers decide to go to cloud, it's not purely a dollar for dollar cost conversation. So I'd love to dig into that, and the conversation that happens in the room when folks are making decisions, and start there.
That's a great place to start, actually. I think and to start us off, I think we all agree that moving to cloud is definitely not a strictly cost conversation. I mean, if it was, so many organizations probably just wouldn't move to, wouldn't go to cloud in the first place. So, but yeah, I think that's a really good starting point.
Yeah, I think one of the things that happens, of course, on infrastructure teams, for the most part, you have a budget, and we've kind of learned to think about that budget in a very particular way, that you have a 3-year or 5-year, 7-year cycle, whatever that is. And you buy your hardware, and you buy as much infrastructure as you think you're going to need for a long period of time. And then after that point, like if you need another VM, it's kind of free. Like you're not thinking about the cost per VM, but there are other challenges that come in as you're deploying in that kind of a model. And that is, well, what if all of a sudden we need a ton of capacity that we don't have? Or what if there's a new capability? Or what if we need a new app that requires, GPUs to use the hard to get hardware of the day? And right. Those become big problems. And so I think part of what happens when, as a networking person, infrastructure person, we look at, okay, well, I can run a VM cheaper on-prem than I can run one in the public cloud. I think what happens when we do that is we're missing a big part of the reason why, and wanted to explore that a bit, talk through the conversations that happen in the room when those decisions are made. I guess in the back of my mind, I'm thinking of a former coworker I worked with who was, always the curmudgeon, and everybody who made any decisions was always clueless. They just, they were the stereotypical Dilbert management boss. And I think, so he was always like grousing, I don't know why we did it this way, and it doesn't make any sense to do it this way, and who decided to do this? And I can just hear his voice in the back of my mind as we have some of these conversations. And there are good reasons that are bigger and more holistic, when we're talking about, public cloud.
Well, who are the types of people, I guess, that you see come into these conversations, right? Because it's different. I know you've been in a lot of different spaces over the years. So like, I know you worked for VMware for a while, right? So if you had on-prem discussions about this kind of stuff, are the people the same? Like the key players that make these decisions, are they the same as on-prem versus the people that are coming in to decide these things in the cloud as well?
Well, I think it really depends on the organization, but the personas are different. Sometimes you'll have a customer that really wants to evacuate a data center, and very often those decision makers are pretty much the same because they're the folks who run and manage and own the data centers, and so what their concerns and questions are different than, say, a line of business leader. But often you'll have a line of business leader that's in healthcare, for example. We have a problem in our ICU units with sepsis, right? Is there something you can do to help us detect sepsis cases, right? And that's a very different conversation than how do I move my data center? Right. That's a very business focused conversation. And so a lot of times I think it's easy in the day to day nuts and bolts of making the technology work to lose sight of what real business problems the technology is there to solve. And so, and that could be, and sometimes those problems are more technical or sometimes they're less technical. I mean, we have an entire universe of a video library. If you're talking about a media and entertainment company, right? And we want to be able to find the Barbie movie releases, and we want to be able to find every video or every picture that we've got that has pink lipstick in it, right? We may not want to brand it Barbie because it's going to cost us money, but we would love to update our socials with pictures that are pink. Can you help me find that? Right. And so that's a very different conversation than how many VMs do I need? Or, are we going to run on GKE? Or are we going to run OpenStack on-prem? Or are we going to run, what technical platform? And so I think it's always important to tie back to, okay, so what technical problem is this trying to solve? And then what is the business getting out of it as opposed to what does it take? What's the price per VM, for example? I keep going back to that, but it's an easy number.
I'm curious. So like in your position as of today, are you more so having the conversation around expanding capabilities, like adding new capabilities like the ones you just mentioned, or optimizing infrastructure?
I think the customers that I see that are most successful when they're moving to cloud have a very clear idea of what it's going to do for their business. I think customers and it's fine if what it's doing for their business is it's eliminating the costs of maintaining a physical data center and dealing with the power and the site development and site management and cooling. And, there's a lot beyond just the technology. There's the physical plant details. And if they know that's what they want to accomplish, they're much more successful than, the customer that's like, hey, I've heard cloud is a thing and it's the new place to be and we should be there too. Right. That is almost a recipe for disaster. And customers have done that. What's the new hotness? And we want to be in on that. And if they don't understand what problem they're solving with it, that's when they get into trouble.
Throw everything into microservices and put them in the cloud, right?
Yeah, right.
Well, everything is magical.
Yeah, well, there was the gold rush of everybody It's like all the CIOs of the world got together and decided that they were all going to evacuate their data centers without any consideration of what they were trying to evacuate and all of that, right? We've gone over that 100 times. You touched on something I wanted to go back to just a little bit, which is this idea of, if you wanted to do agility on-prem, you basically have to overbuild. Like you have to, like you mentioned, okay, well, the business all of a sudden, for whatever reason, needs a ton more capacity than sits in their data center today. And that's actually very difficult to scale up to or create more VMs out of thin air, right? And, we're talking about not just a cost discussion, but a business agility discussion. Now, this is interesting because, of course, that is a very technical discussion about, all right, well, how many more VM capacity do we need? But we as the technologists tend to forget that, we just didn't decide out of nowhere that we needed all this extra capacity. The business on the back end is doing something that's asking us to create all this new capacity. And it's very easy for us to lose sight of that driving force, if you will, the business reason to do it. But no, I just wanted to point out that just what you said, it's difficult to do on-prem, and the agility of being able to suddenly, all of a sudden, you got all the capacity you need to do that thing you're trying to do is definitely one of the reasons why people make that decision to move their workloads or their technology to the cloud.
And from a technical standpoint, like you have to be at a certain size to be able to provide any kind of level of geographic redundancy, right? If it's most smaller orgs, it is very capital intensive to build out 2 data centers. And especially 2 that are more than 100 miles apart, which for really sure. you just about have to have, if you want to avoid any kind of major like geological weather event. And I think those are other like more technical, important capabilities. But honestly, that I don't see customers choosing cloud just because of the regional capability. Usually that's an incredible bonus. It's something that the cloud has to have, but it's typically not the deciding factor.
That's a really good one, because I see it all the time with customers that I have. Nobody ever even talks about that as a benefit. Just having that available and then comparing the costs of what it is to spin up and maintain 2 entire geographically, dispersed data centers and, running between them as well. Because I think all the CSPs have some kind of like backbone, some kind of feature where you can ride on the backbone and get really low latency between them as well.
If you look at object storage, for example, everybody's got object storage. Ours is Google Cloud Storage, but it is a fraction of a cent per gigabyte to use a regional bucket, or to use a multi-region bucket or a dual region bucket than it is to use a single region bucket. You don't have to. There's no engineering effort there for you, right? And those kinds of capabilities, like it just takes a whole layer of complexity off the customer's plate. And that provides a ton of value, because as much as we, is networking going away? Is this going away or whatever? There are not enough people skilled enough to do the jobs that we need done. And so I feel like often those conversations are almost a red herring, because everybody is starved for talent. And the more we can do to bake that into the system, the higher value work that folks can do. And those are all conversations that are had. I think a lot of times when we're individual contributors, we don't think of I know it was the case with me, especially for the first 10 or 15 years of my career, is like, I'm worried about what I have to do and I have to get done and how I can make a project successful. But there's another problem of like, how do we make sure we have all the people we need to do all the things that need to be done? And then there's also, what exactly is it all those people should be doing? And then the layer of what's going on in the marketplace and what, how do we differentiate ourselves as an organization? Like there are these layers of problems to solve. And and we can get myopic on the technical problems and not see the bigger picture problems that the decision makers are really concerned about. And I think the thing that I've grown into lately, those problems are no less real problems than how to architect our leaf spine fabric in our data centers, right?
Yeah, that is a great point. So back to what you said, like referencing your old coworker, the typical curmudgeon. Like how do we try to bridge that gap and help make sure everyone understands the common goal, right? Because I don't know, I see this plenty of times as well. You have that person that's arguing, why would we pay for this? Why are we having talks about capacity? We've never had, capacity concerns with our existing, on-prem environment. Do we think it's rooted in like FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, with talks about certain aspects going away in the cloud? Or is it just that there's difficulty for, operators and things like that to see the same, 10 miles down the road that the C-level executives have?
Well, I think that problems can occur at every layer of every layer in the organization, right? You could have a problem from the C-level down to the, VPs or the senior directors or the manager. Like there are different problems that happen at each of those levels. And there can be problems at multiple layers, right? I mean, some orgs run where a decision gets made at the top and that gets pushed down and this is what we're doing and we're going to do it this way. And you really don't get a vote. That is not a way to run a well-functioning technology organization. There are several companies though that get by and operate that way. Fair talent, but your innovative people, they may get some skills there, but eventually if they don't have a voice, they're going to go somewhere else. Right. Mm-hmm. And so that's one problem, is that leadership is not transparent at all about what they're doing or why they're doing it. If you look at the other from the individual contributor level, I think one of the things I've said this before, I'm going to say it again, that, if your company has an all hands where your top level executive leaders are speaking, you should go. You should listen. And a lot of and again, one of my curmudgeon friends, like they're not going to say anything that matters to me. I'm going to pull cable in the data center yesterday and I'm going to pull it today and I'm going to pull it tomorrow. Well, but what those leadership conversations and what those all hands do, if they've done reasonably well at all, is first of all, you pick up the vocabulary. What's the vocabulary our leaders are using? And so you can talk about how your work fits in their language. It also helps you understand what the business priorities are. It helps you see what your leaders care about. And yes, at the end of the day, is there a huge difference in running a voice over IP phone system, for a tech company or for a healthcare company or for a manufacturing company? Maybe not, because everybody needs a phone system, but there may be some special capabilities that you need or that you are implementing that can help, or a new emerging technology that has an interesting use case for your company. And you need to understand what those priorities are, because at some point you may be in an elevator, or you may be, in a lunch line, or you may be part of a conversation somewhere, where you can speak intelligently. And so it's always valuable to know and understand. So I think that's something that individual contributors can do, is understand their leaders, listen to them, even when maybe you're not sure how it's relevant to your day to day. I think the other thing is understand how your organization budgets and what they care about and how those numbers percolate up. Do we, is it CapEx heavy? Is it OpEx heavy? Which of those categories is most painful? I've worked in companies where they would spend CapEx all day, every day, But if you were going to do, if the dollars were OPEX, there was a whole different level of scrutiny. And understanding those things makes a big difference in what you can buy, when, how you present what you want to do. So that's also important. And I think all of those things become part of those higher level conversations and part of the equation beyond what particular technology that we need. I mean, I've seen, and this is certainly not unique to cloud, but sometimes those financial drivers between how something can be financed and structured will radically impact the solutions a company will choose, because they have financial constraints, frankly. Like, just like you have a budget at home and you have financial constraints that dictate, what model car you're going to get. So does your company. And understanding those things matter as well.
I always like to refer to the Venn diagram: fast, easy, and cheap. Pick two, right?
Very much.
and that's and I think when you're talking about like business drivers to go to the cloud, fast, easy, cheap, it really is like pick two of those as well, right?
I keep wanting to believe that paradigm is wrong, but I'm hard pressed to find a scenario where it is.
Yeah, right.
But I mean, those are the kind of drivers that the business has to figure out, right? Like, do they value agility? Okay, well, what's the dollar value the agility is worth? Do they need a new technology because the competition is utilizing this new technology to get an edge on them? All right, well, what's that worth, and how much is in the war chest to try to catch up or overtake? Like those. I think those are the kind of conversations that are most interesting, and that basically nobody outside of the C-suite is probably ever going to see.
I've been part of conversations with IT leaders where they're like, they want to pull out like their hardware vendor costs. Like, this is what we paid Dell or EMC, which they're now the same thing, and Cisco, and like here's what we paid those guys last year. Now here's the price you have to beat, and it's like that's not really how this works, right? Because you don't have a line item for power in your budget. You don't, you're not responsible for paying for those things. And I think, and it gets challenging when you're having this very myopic conversation. Like, well, this is how much our switches cost, and this is how much our servers cost, and this is how much our licensing costs. Okay. Like, that's the cost. It's like, well, not exactly. But at the same time, it is unrealistic to be like, well, then, we don't need all these people anymore. Well, that equation doesn't work either, because things still have to be built and managed and operated and maintained. And the hope is that you can have your folks doing more high value work. And I believe that's often the case. And you can take some things off your plate, but you also, you have to articulate that value more in what the people can accomplish, as opposed to, in very rare situations, I've seen customers like, hey, we've got, 100 offshore people that are band-aiding this really awful, broken, hard process, and we would like to eliminate that. Every now and then a situation comes up like that, but it's usually like that. It's very low value work already, right, that have got people like pushing papers around or checking boxes or, alt tabbing through 30 different interfaces because
stuff that's
the system
hard to automate,
wasn't designed.
basically.
Yeah. So, I think it's just never, but I think the other thing too, I've worked with customers, especially in a former life, who would be like, they would switch an entire platform vendor for 3% cost savings. And like, they believed their value was choking out additional 3% by being a jerk to their vendor.
Finance.
And that was a win. And what I will tell you is that once you throw in the disruption of that technology change and the migration costs and the retraining, you've not saved 3%, so there has to be a bigger reason to encourage a technology change than a few percentage points in price saving. It just doesn't make sense to do it for a couple percentage points.
Yeah. What you see this a lot, what I see this a lot is when the incentives of a business to their, whatever, say their procurement or finance department, and it's not solely that, right? It's really incentives across the board, across the whole business. When they are ones that are easy to quantify on paper, but bring very little true value to the business, like that's when you see this kind of like, why would you do this type of stuff, right? Those procurement people probably are either incentivized or metriced on being able to bring down vendor costs 3%. And of course, really the business is actually paying a shitload more money on the back end, like we pointed out. But on paper, hey, I saved the business 3%. That was my metric, right?
I have lots of thoughts, none of them fully formed, about, misaligned incentives and how do we, yes, create incentives that are measurable, that give people a sense of individual like performance and accomplishment, but also work toward a collective goal. It's almost like that is another one of those pick two situations, because you can create a system that really highly rewards individuals, but also disincentivizes them from working as a team. And that is a net loss for the business. And this happens as for individuals. It also happens for departments. And so if and it also depends on how an organization silos, because if you're like, these are our on-prem data center people, and these are our cloud people, and they're in different groups and they have different budgets. Well, all of a sudden your on-prem people are fighting your cloud people for workloads because they want business relevance, as opposed to saying, what's the right target for this workload? What problem are we trying to solve? Where does it make sense to run it? You end up with this battle between teams because, everybody wants, it's existential at that point. Like we want to exist, and as opposed to creating an environment where, and frankly, like there is no perfect answer, because you have to divide people into teams and you have to organize them and manage them in small groups, because you just can't have a team of 50 people. And then figuring out where to draw those lines and how to do it. I've come to appreciate those as very real and significant problems that require just as much skill and effort to solve as, how to connect 3 clouds and with on-prem and make sure that the packets all get from point A to point B.
Well, the hidden costs in all this, right? I've actually seen this quite a bit, where like you were talking about, a finance department will make a decision for something like a support contract, and they don't talk to the people that now have to deal with this new support team. And it just causes all these hidden costs between these departments that nobody's thinking about. So it seems like it saved them money, but in the back end, right, it's just causing all kinds of other issues and raising costs elsewhere, or like missed SLAs, or like not even financial costs. There's just other costs that aren't taken into account when those decisions are made in the first place.
Yeah, and this is not even a cloud example, but I had in my past, I had a situation where we had a partner, and the partner had really, really gone out of their way to help us. They'd given us spare gear. They'd helped us build out a POC. They had provided, customer engineers, sales engineers who were incredibly helpful, and provided all kinds of really relevant guidance. And so we made a product selection. And then when it went to procurement, they chose like the bargain basement company to procure from
every time.
And our partner was like really justifiably livid. And it became a thing, right? And those problems don't go away. Like the last thing you want is your FinOps team or your procurement department going, well, why did you use this load balancer instead of that one? Right. Or to create, circumstances in which, you're choosing suboptimal architectures because of pricing. Now that's a different scenario. And I think that's why we see a lot more talk about FinOps, and, because there is an art to managing cloud costs, but it's got to be holistic. It can't just be, well, this one's cheaper. Now justify why you have to use the more expensive one. It just shifts the conversation around a little bit.
It reminds me a little bit of the and not to plunge us into the political realm, that it reminds me of the American health insurance system. When you talk about medicine, your doctor prescribes you something, and then now you got to go justify that to the health insurance company why you need that medicine.
Yeah, very much. And we can set up systems where that wasn't intentional, but that is the ultimate outcome, right? Where the people who need to make the right decisions for, the health of a infrastructure, a health of the environment, those decisions are called into question by tons of other people. Now, here's the thing. Checks and balances are important. And I think our world is so complex now that very rarely can a very small group of people make a decision, especially if that small group of people has limited scope of understanding. But also we got to communicate, and those and they are hard problems. I don't think any of these have an answer. You got to know your business, and you got to know what makes sense.
Yeah, there's a lot of tribalism, a lot of walls to knock down to make the whole thing work. Really, just as a company, and especially when we're talking about teams, making decisions about cloud. Just to bring it back to the topic, there's a lot of tribalism in who makes decisions about what, who's relevant to what. Fighting over workloads is a perfect example, right? And somebody needs to be making those decisions in a way that is best for the business, but also takes all of the information that both teams, that whoever's got input has to give, and some you have to pay some attention to that.
Well, and one of the things that I've seen too is a lot of times we don't always think through what value is being unlocked for the business. So let's say you adopt a new technology, public cloud or otherwise, but what it does is it enables a team not just to operate better, but it enables an entire new line of business, or it gives the business insights that creates revenue, right? At that point, it's not just about the cost of whatever the thing is. It's how much additional revenue can we make? And I find that if you can make a really valid, clear, believable argument for those things, then for unlocking new business potential, then all of a sudden, the infrastructure cost, it's just the cost of doing business. And I think sometimes, and it's easy to lose sight of that when your entire world is operating whatever that thing is, because a lot of the levers that you have control over are those day-to-day operational expenses. But I also think it's important if another good thing to do is not just listen to an all hands, but if your company's public trade, like an earnings call, if you can tie something that you're working on to something that comes up in an earnings call in a positive way, there's huge value there. And so many of the customers that I see that are really successful in adopting cloud, it's because it's tied to that kind of an initiative. If it's something that's going to come up in a board meeting, it's a big deal. If you can tie it to major positive revenue changes, it's no longer just about the comparison of cost. Now, over time, as that, whatever that new thing is, as that becomes part of business as usual in the industry, of course, they're going to optimize, they're going to squeeze, they're going to try and get, because all of a sudden, okay, so we've got all that revenue now. We want incrementally more, Right.
Right.
But you've always got to be looking for that. What's the next thing that's going to change the revenue curve? And then the technology is just not that hard to justify.
Yeah, like the first mover advantage, right? Especially
sure.
if you're opening up something new that your competitors aren't doing yet. You don't even know what the infrastructure is going to be like half the time, right? You just want to spin up things quickly. I see that a lot too, as reasonings for people moving.
Sure. And, that's a double-edged sword, right? I mean, but at the end of the day, often we have to make it to market first is a big deal. And it can be, and if you're cutting corners on reliability or things like that early on, a lot of times the market will be more forgiving I think about the early days of social media, right? I mean, how many outages did we have? And yeah, they were a problem, but I also think people are like, we're doing something new here, right? And it was understandable that, we were still trying to figure out how to scale those systems. Now, one of those marquee services, there was a big like S3 outage and it was several years ago now, but I mean, it was a thing, man. It was a big deal. It was a problem. And so I think like the market can be more forgiving. And if something allows you to move more quickly and get to market faster, that's also a huge deal. It's just,
Yeah.
it's hard to quantify, but it's real. And those are also things we
Yeah.
have to consider.
And your industry matters a lot when it comes to that too, right? Like there's some industries that you have to move faster than everyone else. And it's a difference between a lot of money.
Yeah, and over time, as capabilities stabilize and as the technology stabilizes, I think we're almost going to see I'm picturing sort of kind of a wheel of technology where you have a thing that's new and hot, and we need to be fast, and over time that thing is going to standardize, and maybe it runs somewhere different after a certain period of time, right? Because it's predictable. We know exactly what the workload profile is going to be. We know exactly what compute it's going to need. But then we have these other things. The example for that right now is all these AI workloads, right? Everybody's constrained on capacity from a hardware perspective. Folks are still trying to figure out like, what's a good thing for a language model to do? What's the thing that we shouldn't let a large language model do because it's going to hallucinate and put somebody at risk? Like, and those things, if you wanted to build out a platform to do that on premises and you don't have, data scientists, like it's just not something you can do. Right. And so where does it make sense to really innovate, move fast? And those are also part of that cloud conversation. Their value that maybe our, the folks that are managing and configuring our infrastructure every day just don't see. But they're equally important.
Yeah, I think the models themselves will end up being a product. Not just like here's the compute to run your models, but I think the models themselves will definitely be a product, especially for people who can't create the data science. And we talked about this with Peter Jones when we were talking about the whole AI revolution and LLMs and the networks we'd need to build for them and whatnot. Is that the data that goes? I mean, why did Cisco just buy Splunk? I mean, yeah, great, Splunk's a household name, but I think they wanted the data. I think they wanted the models and the AI and that was way more to them than the name. So I mean, yeah, I completely agree. All right, looks like we're coming up on time, so let's go ahead and wrap up. We always love having you on, Eyvonne. You're always welcome, truly. Is there any closing thoughts? Anything we forgot to cover? Any points you wanted to make that we didn't get a chance to hit yet?
Yeah, no, I think it's just and and you may stop having me on because I feel like I'm repeating myself often, but I think it's so super important to pull back from our day-to-day view of, our day jobs and understand the bigger picture of what the business is trying to accomplish, where we fit in that, and then how to take what we do. And I have a peer who calls it a steel thread, right? To pull that steel thread from where we are, what we're building, all the way up through the business to understand how that helps our companies accomplish their mission. For most of our orgs, there's a revenue target, there are shareholders, there are those considerations. But even for nonprofits or service-based organizations, like how does what you do align to the mission of the organization? And the more you understand that, the more you can make good decisions where you are. And also maybe, hopefully, understand the decisions that have been made and why certain platforms make sense or don't. And to speak that language, because it'll add value to you, to your organization, and it'll help you be more effective. Which I think most of us, if we're listening to something like this and showing up, like we want to be effective and we want to know how to do our jobs well, and we want to know how to contribute where we are. So, yeah, that's my shtick.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think that's important because just that whole exercise of trying to see where you fit into the, if you're an individual contributor, where you fit into that strategy. It's important to make that mapping to see, if that aligns with what you even want to do, right? Sometimes that exercise can end in you determining that, maybe this organization isn't for me, right? But you at least can see how individual contributors can map to that and where you may fit in someone else, right? Or at somewhere else, right?
Yeah. And I think it can provide context to, is what you said, Chris, is this the right place for me to be? Or maybe it's okay for now, but maybe I need to start pivoting, in this direction, or maybe I need to gain these skills here, or maybe I need to get to know somebody in this peer, organization to understand a little bit more about their world. I think if we pay attention to those kinds of things, we can add a lot of like intangible value that's not going to be, that we can't get a cert for, that there's not an exam that we can take, but it's still meaningful.
All right. Alex, any closing thoughts?
No, I mean, I was going to say a lot of what Chris said, so I will.
Stole your thunder.
I will echo that. Yeah, I mean, I think it's practical advice, right? It's something that's not talked about often is looking at that as a kind of way to integrate yourself into a company and advance yourself as well as your career. So I just love that advice. I think it's really great.
Okay, well, this has been Cables to Clouds. If you liked what you heard and or saw, depending on where you are consuming, please, smash that like button on YouTube and subscribe to us. Subscribe to us on your favorite podcatcher. Follow us. I'll give you, if you're interested, I'll give you Alex's home address where you can find him. And, and we'll see you guys next time. Hi everyone, it's Tim, and this has been the Cables to Clouds podcast. Thanks for tuning in today. If you enjoyed our show, please subscribe to us in your favorite podcast catcher, as well as subscribe and turn on notifications for our YouTube channel to be notified of all our new episodes. Follow us on socials at Cables2Clouds. You can also visit our website for all the show notes at cables2clouds.com. Thanks again for listening, and see you next time.